Mayday, Mayday, United 1247, we've lost both engines, we're going down. That was the last transmission I, as captain, made to the control tower before accepting that we were about to die. 247 souls on board, including children, entire families, and I had exactly 6 minutes to accept that my science, my technology, and my 15 years of experience would not be able to save us. But then, a 70-year-old lady did something that changed everything. And what happened in the next 3 minutes defies every known law of commercial aviation. Today, 3 years later, I am no longer an atheist pilot who mocked religion, but a missionary carrying the gospel through the skies of South America. And when you hear what happened in those 6 minutes of absolute terror, you will understand why even Boeing's top engineers still cannot explain how we are alive. My name is David Harrison. I'm 38 years old from Texas, USA, and this is the most impossible testimony you will ever hear. Before I continue, write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know how far this testimony is reaching, because what I'm about to share needs to reach the whole world. It was just an ordinary Tuesday when I stepped into the cockpit of United Airlines Boeing 737, but I was not an ordinary pilot. With a degree in aeronautical engineering from MIT, specializing in flight systems, I had logged over 12,000 flight hours and carried a technical pride that bordered on absolute arrogance. For me, flying was pure mathematics. Bernoulli's equations, the laws of thermodynamics, precise calculations of lift and drag. There was no room for superstition or invisible forces. My wife Sarah always teased me, "David, you're scientifically arrogant, and one day that's going to cost you dearly." She was more right than she could have imagined. I literally laughed when I saw people praying before flights, calling it psychological placebo for weak minds that don't understand physics. How many times had I mocked nervous passengers making the sign of the cross during takeoff? To me, they were ignorant people who didn't understand that it was physics, not God, that kept those 80 tons suspended in the air. If something went wrong up there, it would be my training, my technical knowledge, and my experience that would save us. Prayers, please. I trusted Boeing's manuals, strict emergency protocols, and my proven ability to solve problems under extreme pressure. God was a crutch for people who didn't have enough courage to trust in science. During safety briefings, I would roll my eyes when flight attendants mentioned praying for a safe flight. My religion was avionics. My God was technology. Every redundant system, every emergency protocol, every hour in the simulator, those were my guardian angels. The cockpit was my temple of rationality, where medieval superstitions had no place. That scientific arrogance completely defined who I was until that Tuesday that shattered every certainty I had about who really controls the laws of physics. United Airlines Flight 1247, Denver to Miami. 247 souls on board, excited families heading to Disney World, weary executives returning from endless meetings, retirees finally enjoying the life they had built, and in seat 12C, an elderly woman with gray hair who I didn't yet know, but who in a matter of hours would make me question 15 years of unshakable scientific certainties. The weather was absolutely perfect. Crystal blue skies, unlimited visibility, favorable winds gently pushing us south. Every system on the Boeing was running like a German Swiss watch. Cabin pressurization stable, GPS navigation precise. Pratt & Whitney engines purring in perfect mechanical harmony. It was exactly the kind of flight we pilots call boring perfect. So flawless it was almost dull. Mike Thompson, my co-pilot for 8 years and a trusted friend, commented casually as he checked the route on the flight computer, "Dave, this is going to be another smooth flight. In 3 hours, we'll be sipping mojitos on Miami Beach, watching the waves." As an experienced pilot, I should have knocked on wood. Those fateful words always precede the most challenging and terrifying moments in commercial aviation. But at that moment, climbing smoothly through fluffy clouds at a comfortable 2,500 feet per minute, I was casually checking emails on my tablet, completely unaware that I was exactly 47 minutes away from experiencing something that would shatter my faith in science and force me to accept that there is an infinitely greater power controlling every atom of this universe I thought I understood. Cruising altitude, 35,000 feet. Speed, 547 Mach. Everything absolutely normal and under control. And then, at 2:23:17 p.m., a time forever burned into my memory as trauma, the technically impossible happened. Without any prior alarm, no warning from the computers, not the slightest abnormal reading on the digital instruments, the left CFM56-7B engine simply died. It wasn't a gradual failure or progressive loss of power. It was as if someone had coldly flipped a giant switch in the sky. In 15 years of commercial flying, through severe storms, extreme turbulence, and various emergencies, I had never witnessed such a sudden, silent, and completely inexplicable shutdown. Mike reacted with the precision of a surgeon, instantly initiating the complex emergency procedures while I took full, absolute control of the heavy aircraft. My fingers danced across the instruments with millimetric precision. Engine failure checklist, careful weight redistribution, delicate aerodynamic compensation. Everything my years of intensive training at MIT had taught me was being applied perfectly. But then Mike shouted the words that literally froze my blood. "David, the right engine is failing too. We're losing power in free fall." A simultaneous dual engine failure is statistically almost impossible in modern aircraft. The mathematical odds are roughly 1 in 150 million flights, but cruel mathematics wasn't lying. We were turning a fully operational Boeing 737 into an 80-ton metal glider over the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Emergency Protocol Number 1. Desperately attempting to restart dead engines, I followed every step of the technical manual like a programmed robot, meticulously checking fuel systems, resetting complex digital controllers, attempting forced manual ignition. Nothing, absolutely nothing responded to my desperate commands. The engines remained dead as cold stones while the altimeter plummeted relentlessly. 34,000 feet, 30,500, 33,000. My engineer's mind went into total overdrive, racing frantically through all known technical possibilities. Catastrophic fuel pump failure. Highly unlikely. We have multiple redundant systems. Generalized electrical problem. Technically impossible. The auxiliary generators were functioning perfectly. Ice formation in critical air ducts? Made no sense. We were flying in completely clear skies over sunny Colorado. Mayday, mayday. United 1247, dual catastrophic engine failure, descending rapidly for emergency forced landing, requesting urgent vector to nearest available airport. The professionally calm voice of the air traffic controller confirmed my worst imaginable nightmare. United 1247, nearest airport is Denver International, bearing 270 degrees, exact distance 47 nautical miles. 47 nautical miles. With our current descent rate of around 200 feet per minute, mathematically impossible to reach. I did the mental calculation 3 consecutive times. We would need a glide ratio of at least 120 to get there alive. The Boeing 737 without engines can only achieve 117 in the best scenario. The math was brutally cruel and definitive. We were going to fall approximately 8 fatal nautical miles short of the runway of salvation. Mike headed heavily to the passenger cabin to make the announcement that no experienced commander ever wants to make in their entire career. Through the armored cabin door, I could distinctly hear absolute chaos setting in. Desperate screams of pure terror, inconsolable crying of frightened children, people frantically calling beloved family members. "I love you infinitely, Mom. The plane is falling from the sky. Please, take care of my children if I can't make it home." Human voices of absolute despair that cut my soul like sharp razors. As the responsible commander, I needed to maintain external professional composure, but internally my rational mind was making inevitable macabre calculations. Forced landing without engines over rocky mountainous terrain. Estimated fatal impact speed of 100 mph. Realistic chances of collective survival, less than 3%. 15 years of brutal experience told me coldly that we were all living our last precious minutes of existence. But then, amid the deafening chaos, I heard something that completely contrasted with the collective hysteria. An elderly female voice, incredibly calm and serene, speaking in a low but constant and firm tone. These weren't desperate screams, weren't laments of despair. It seemed almost like an intimate and caring conversation with someone invisible but real. Most mysteriously, gradually and inexplicably, the terrified voices around her began to visibly calm down. It was as if a supernatural wave of peace was spreading magnetically through the cabin, radiating directly from that row 12C. My scientific mind couldn't process it logically. How can a person be in absolute peace when we're literally plummeting from the sky towards certain death? Scientific curiosity has always been my dominant nature. I left Mike in control for a few crucial moments and quickly headed to the cabin to personally check the state of the terrified passengers. What I witnessed in row 12C left me completely perplexed and confused. A lady of approximately 70 years, grey hair carefully styled, eyes gently closed, hands joined reverently, speaking softly, in a constant tone, but with an expression of absolutely transcendental peace stamped on her wrinkled face. "Ma'am, are you feeling all right?" I asked, with genuine concern, expecting to find signs of traumatic shock or denial of reality. She calmly opened her eyes, contemplated me with a serene smile that radiated inexplicable tranquility, and responded with a firm voice, "I'm praying fervently for all of us, Commander. God has total control of this situation." For some scientific reason I couldn't explain rationally, those simple words, coming from someone who should be in absolute panic like everyone else, caused me a strange chill that ran down my entire spine. It was completely contradictory. While 246 people screamed in despair, facing imminent death, this woman demonstrated supernatural calm that defied all psychological logic I knew. It wasn't denial of reality, wasn't emotional shock. It was something different, something my technical training couldn't categorize or understand. It was as if she possessed privileged information about the outcome of this tragedy that we, with all our advanced technology, didn't have access to. "Commander," she continued with that disturbing serenity, "may I ask a personal question? Do you believe in miracles?" Normally, I would have offered a politely skeptical response, perhaps even condescending, explaining the scientific basis of reality. However, being exactly 4 minutes from a possible fatal impact that would kill 247 people, something deep inside me made me pause and consider the question seriously. "Honestly, ma'am, I believe exclusively in science," I responded with brutal honesty, my voice revealing the extreme tension I was trying to hide. "Equations, physics, engineering, these are the forces that govern our universe." She smiled again, this time with an almost maternal expression, as if looking at a child who doesn't yet understand fundamental truths of existence. "Then I'll pray specifically for your science to quickly find the technical solution you need to save us," she said with absolute conviction. "But I'll also humbly ask my God to clearly show you that He is the creator and author of all science that exists." Before I could formulate any response or counter-argument, she closed her eyes again and resumed her silent prayer. There was something in that unshakable tranquility that violently contrasted with my desperate logical analysis of the situation. While I calculated probabilities of death, she conversed with an invisible presence as if discussing the weather. It was simultaneously fascinating and disturbing to my rational mind. I ran back desperately to the command cabin. Mike was visibly sweating cold, his pale face reflecting the controlled terror we both felt. "David, exactly 2 minutes remain to minimum survival altitude. I need to declare immediate preparation for impact." My trembling hand was positioned over the announcement system button to give the death sentence to passengers when I heard a sound that literally made me freeze in complete disbelief. The left engine had mysteriously come back to life on its own. The familiar and comforting roar of the turbofans filled the cabin again. "Mike, did you activate any procedure? Make any intervention?" I shouted over the sudden noise. "Absolutely nothing. I didn't touch any controls," he responded, equally shocked. The digital instruments showed the engine functioning perfectly, all parameters normal, as if it had never stopped or presented any technical problem. But before we could celebrate or even understand what had happened, we still desperately needed the right engine to maintain stable flight. It was exactly 90 seconds to final critical altitude when it also miraculously returned, alone. Without any technical intervention from us, without restart procedures, without rational explanation. Two engines that were completely dead minutes ago now functioned perfectly, as if a cosmic switch had been turned back on by an invisible and incomprehensible force. As an MIT-trained engineer, I desperately needed rational technical explanations. Commercial jet engines don't simply stop and start working by themselves. There's an extremely complex sequence of specific procedures, rigorous safety checks, particular environmental conditions that must be meticulously met. But all detailed flight records showed unequivocally that the engines simply restarted simultaneously, absolutely contradicting everything I knew about advanced aeronautical mechanics. Mike and I looked at each other in absolute and prolonged silence. 15 years of intense experience, thousands of hours of rigorous simulator training, advanced technical certifications, and we had never witnessed anything remotely similar. "This is not technically possible according to any known manual," I murmured quietly, more to myself than to him, but the incontestable reality was that we were flying completely normally, engines stable and operational, all systems functioning perfectly. The science I venerated had no plausible explanation, but we were indisputably alive. It was as if the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended or rewritten by a higher authority. For the first time in my career, I faced a phenomenon that completely challenged my technical understanding of the universe. There were forces operating beyond my capacity for rational analysis, something that transcended the limits of human engineering and touched territories I had always considered superstitious. We managed to land smoothly in Miami without any additional incident. During the routine disembarkation process, I anxiously searched for the mysterious lady from row 12C. When I found her, she was smiling serenely as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "How did you know, with such certainty, that everything would be all right?" I asked, with genuine scientific curiosity, my voice revealing the mental confusion I felt. She calmly handed me a small white card with a biblical verse printed, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me," Philippians 4:13, and said with touching simplicity, "Commander, I didn't know technically that it would work out, but I had unshakable faith." Her words were simple, but carried a weight I couldn't ignore. "Faith in what, exactly?" I asked with genuine curiosity that surprised even myself. "In a God who completely controls the laws of physics that you know so well and have studied for years," she responded patiently. "He doesn't arbitrarily nullify science. He is the very author and creator of it." Those words kept echoing obsessively in my head for endless days. How could an apparently non-scientific explanation make more logical sense than all my rigorous technical training? It was a paradox that fundamentally challenged my worldview established for decades. The official and meticulous investigation of the simultaneous dual-engine failure lasted exactly 3 intense weeks. Specialized United Airlines engineers, experienced Boeing technicians, world specialists in Pratt & Whitney engines, all meticulously examined every component, every circuit, every line of code in the onboard computers. The final official report was literally the strangest and most bewildering of my entire career. Simultaneous failure without identifiable technical cause. Automatic restart completely inexplicable by known technical standards. In other words, something happened that modern science, with all its technological sophistication, couldn't explain rationally. For the first time in my entire life, my rational training encountered an absolute and insurmountable limit. There was something operating far beyond human knowledge in that specific situation. And for the first time in decades of skepticism, I began to seriously consider the disturbing possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, there was something immensely greater controlling this universe than I had ever imagined possible. I began researching Christianity with the same rigorous scientific methodology I always used to study complex aviation systems. I read extensively books on Christian apologetics, studied detailed historical evidence, analyzed sophisticated philosophical arguments with the same precision I examined Boeing technical manuals. To my complete surprise, I found extraordinary intellectual depth that I never expected to find in organized religion. Authors like C.S. Lewis, William Lane Craig, Lee Strobel, all with extremely rigorous academic backgrounds from world-prestigious universities, presented consistent logical arguments and historical evidence that directly challenged my decades-established atheism. For the first time in my life, I perceived with disturbing clarity that my prejudice against faith was much more emotional than genuinely rational. I was systematically rejecting something I had never seriously investigated with the same scientific diligence I applied to any other important subject. It was like trying to judge aerodynamics without ever having studied physics, intellectually dishonest and academically lazy. For weeks, I immersed myself in texts on philosophy, biblical archaeology, ancient manuscripts, evidence of the resurrection. Each page I read more deeply challenged my materialist view of the universe. The arguments weren't based on emotionality or blind tradition, but on rigorous logic and verifiable historical evidence. My analytical mind, trained to detect technical flaws, couldn't find significant gaps in well-founded Christian argumentation. 3 months after the traumatic incident, another flight marked me deeply in an unexpected way. Flight 892 to Seattle, severely adverse weather conditions, extreme turbulence that made even experienced pilots tense. A massive storm that meteorologically should have lasted at least 6 hours was dissipating in a completely anomalous and inexplicable way. A Christian passenger in first class commented casually, "Looks like someone powerful is praying for all of us up there." This time, instead of dismissing with disdain as I always did, I paid genuine scientific attention, and I began to perceive a statistical pattern that my analytical mind could no longer rationally deny. Flight situations that should have been technically problematic resolved themselves in completely inexplicable ways when there were people sincerely praying aboard. Severe turbulence that ceased abruptly, storms that dissipated against all meteorological forecasts, minor mechanical problems that corrected themselves. Pure coincidence? Statistically, with the frequency I was observing, it was beginning to seem mathematically improbable. My scientific training forced me to consider that perhaps there were unmeasured variables operating in these situations, variables that my instruments couldn't detect, but which had observable and consistent effects on physical reality. My wife, Sarah, always perceptive, noticed the subtle but significant change in my behavior. "David, you're completely different. Less chronically anxious, more thoughtful and reflective, almost serene." She was absolutely right in her observation. I began questioning not only the technical mechanics of flights, but much deeper existential questions about the fundamental purpose of human life. If there really was an intelligent creator behind the elegant physical laws I had known and admired for decades, what specific plan might he have for my individual existence? Did my life have any transcendent meaning beyond simply piloting commercial aircraft from one airport to another? I began praying experimentally, first as a controlled scientific experiment to test if there was any measurable effect, then gradually as a genuine emotional and spiritual necessity. And something absolutely extraordinary happened that caught me completely off guard. I found a deep inner peace that no professional achievement, no high salary, no technical recognition had been able to provide me. It was as if a fundamental part of me that had always been painfully empty finally found its proper place in the universe. For the first time in decades, I felt that perhaps my life had a greater purpose than simply maximizing operational efficiency and accumulating flight hours. One particularly clear night, alone in the cockpit during a routine night flight to Los Angeles, I looked through the windshield at the infinite starry sky and simply spoke honestly with God for the first time in my life. If you really exist, if it was you who miraculously saved that flight and all those people, I need to know the truth. Please, show me clearly if you are real. Dame. In that silent moment at 37,000 feet altitude, I felt a transcendent presence that I cannot describe scientifically with adequate words, but which was infinitely more real and tangible than any flight instrument I had ever operated. It wasn't a hysterical emotional experience or hallucination. It was a profoundly rational encounter with a reality that transcends the limits of known physics. 2 weeks after that transformative experience, in a small Baptist church in rural Texas, I formally surrendered my life to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It wasn't an impulsive, emotional decision based on temporary feelings, but the logical result of intense months of honest intellectual investigation, deep philosophical questioning, and an undeniable personal experience with the supernatural that fundamentally changed my understanding of reality. Today, 3 transformative years after that flight that changed everything, I continue flying professionally, but now as a dedicated missionary aviator. I use all my accumulated technical experience and aeronautical knowledge to bring the transforming gospel of Jesus Christ to completely isolated and inaccessible communities in South America. Ironically, my rigorous scientific training didn't become an intellectual obstacle to Christian faith, but a powerful tool to understand even better the elegant complexity of God's creation. Every sophisticated aeronautical system I operate reminds me of the supreme intelligence behind the physical laws that govern flight. That precious lady from row 12C, Mrs. Margaret, became a dear friend and spiritual mentor. She patiently taught me that genuine faith and scientific reason are not opposing forces in conflict, but complementary and harmonious. God doesn't fear our most challenging scientific questions. He gave us curious and analytical minds precisely so we could know Him more deeply through detailed study of His magnificent creation. And sometimes, when limited human science encounters its inevitable limits, faith opens doors to realities we never imagined could exist. Dear friends, if this story has deeply touched your heart in some significant way, I humbly ask you to consider supporting this channel through Super Thanks. Your generous financial help is absolutely fundamental for this transforming testimony to reach even further, touch many more thirsty lives, and bring genuine hope to people who, just as I was a few years ago, are lost in the cold darkness of materialistic skepticism. Each contribution, however small financially, helps exponentially to expand this digital ministry and bring God's living word to desperate hearts that urgently need true hope. Your support allows us to continue producing quality content that can literally transform eternal lives. Through Super Thanks, you become a direct partner in this mission of reaching lost souls with the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you manage to get this far in this extensive testimony, it's because God is speaking directly to your heart at this exact moment. Don't let this powerful message die within you without action. Share this testimony urgently with someone specific who needs to hear that God still performs extraordinary miracles today in our modern world. Share it with that skeptical friend who mocks faith, with that dear family member who lost hope and abandoned God, with that close person who is going through devastating turbulence in life and desperately needs a miracle. Always remember, God used an arrogant atheist pilot to demonstrate his supernatural power before 247 witnesses. He can use you too as a powerful instrument to carry this transforming message forward. Never underestimate the spiritual power of a simple sharing done with genuine love. It may be that through your simple but obedient gesture, another life will be completely transformed, just as mine was on that unforgettable day. May God abundantly bless each of you and use this testimony to reach hearts thirsty for His eternal truth.